Investments are on the rise, but is renewable energy the economic and environmental answer to combating global climate change? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. According to the United Nations, coal and gas-fired electricity generation in the year 2015 drew less than half the record investment made in solar, wind and other renewable energy. A report by the UN's Environment Programme put the annual global investment in new renewables at $266 billion, while $130 billion went to coal and gas power stations. China alone provided a third of the world's investment in renewables. Still, despite the heavy investment, costs, technology and storage remain ongoing challenges. We get more now from CGTN's Ryntjes in our newsroom.
And let's start out with the world's two largest consumers of power, the US and China. Last year, the two countries worked to align their interests and jointly agreed to commit to an international climate accord known as the Paris Agreement. Under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement provides huge impetus for governments to develop green energy solutions. The deal has boosted investor confidence in the future of renewable energy.
I am absolutely convinced. Bumps in the road here or there, we are heading to a low-carbon economy. And I don't mean just the United States, I mean globally. The IEA estimates $60 trillion of investment to meet the Paris goals to 2030.
Overall, oil, coal and natural gas still account for the majority of energy production worldwide, but new investments in renewable sources are now double the amount spent on coal and gas plants.
We're seeing a rapid scale-up of renewables, and in the past several years we're seeing more renewables being invested as new capacity than we are for any other fossil source in the electric sector.
The biggest sources are wind and solar, while biomass, geothermal, wave and hydro are also in the mix. In 2015, renewable energy investments in developing countries, including China, India and Brazil, overtook those in developed countries for the first time. Much of that impetus came from China, which invested over $100 billion, a third of the worldwide total.
China itself has substantial motivations to want to both be perceived as reducing its CO2 emissions, but also actually addressing the issue because of the pollution problems currently in Beijing and other cities around China today.
The price of solar and wind power in most global markets is now reaching parity, meaning it costs about the same to produce as the retail price of electricity.
The economies of scale in the production, the manufacturing, the equipment, all of the costs associated with the technology have come down. We also have been moving through a process where we're getting more comfortable permitting these plants. We know how to go through the environmental impact assessments. We know how to look at the opportunities and the economy. We know how to manage the large-scale system integration in a much more seamless way.
Solar and wind power are so-called intermittent sources, meaning you can't always rely on a consistent flow of energy from them. To address that, experts are promoting smart grid technologies, which manage fluctuations in supply and demand, change the mix of energy sources, and store energy when necessary. Investments in these smart grid technologies will make electricity systems much more efficient and will also help to increase the uptake of renewable energy solutions worldwide. Anand.
Thanks, Daniel. Well, let's get to our panel right now. Joining us here in Washington is Tyson Slocum. He's the Energy Program Director for the advocacy group Public Citizen. Steve Milloy focuses on energy, the environment, and public health issues as the founder and publisher of junkscience.com. And joining us from Beijing is Alvin Lin. He's the China Policy Director for Climate and Energy at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's start in Beijing with Alvin. Alvin, China has been a very staunch supporter of the Paris Accord on climate change, which Daniel was talking about a moment ago. That calls for the use of renewable energy, alternative sources of energy. And at the time, the United States was right there, right besides China, as that accord was being negotiated in Paris. Now we have a new president in the United States, President Trump, who said that he's going to roll back those efforts, that in many instances, he doesn't believe that climate change is caused by global warming. What's been China's reaction to that?
China is unwavering in its commitment to addressing climate change and dealing with the pollution caused by fossil fuels. Right outside of this studio today, the air in Beijing is at 280 AQI, so it's a very severe smog day, and that's not all that unusual in the winter in Beijing. So really, China, for its own reasons, for dealing with its air pollution, for dealing with its other environmental issues, and also for growing renewables, wind and solar as a strategic industry, is continuing forward in its efforts to address climate change. So really, the Trump administration's decision is not having all that big an effect on China's commitment.
Tyson, President Trump has signed executive orders that will pave the way for the construction of 2 pipelines, the Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Pipeline. He also wants to revive the coal industry. How big a setback is that for efforts to combat climate change?
I don't really see it as a big setback. I think the executive orders on those 2 pipelines aren't really going to dramatically change domestic or global markets. There's really nothing that Trump can do that's going to revive coal's fortunes. The war on coal was not declared by environmental regulations, but by the marketplace, by the declining cost of natural gas, renewables, and the explosion of efficiency. And yes, Trump is going to disengage the United States from global climate agreements, but that's not going to change where the marketplace is headed. And in the United States, we're going to see states and regional groupings of states lead the way on ensuring that electric utilities continue to push forward with efforts to address climate change. And when you look at where investment is going, as your report noted, money is pouring into renewables because that's where the growth is, that's where the cost declines are. Photovoltaic cells solar cells are decreasing by 20% a year, and within the next 3 years, we're going to see grid parity costs. And when you combine that with what Elon Musk is building out in the Nevada desert, the Gigafactory, I think within the next 5 years, we're going to have grid parity energy storage for most markets in the United States. And in fact, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, has already met with Donald Trump this week. And so I see Donald Trump as maybe trying to throw up some barriers, but at the end of the day, the markets are heading in the direction towards a low-carbon economy.
So, Tyson, are we reading too much into what he's saying? If you say, look, most of this is going to be left to local authorities, to states, are you saying that the White House, the federal government, can't really influence what's going to happen as far as climate change is concerned? Well,
the federal government clearly can influence what our commitments are under international agreements like the Paris Agreement. The federal government, through its administration of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the primary environmental regulator, can definitely peel back a lot of these initiatives to deal with climate change. But if you talk to CEOs of electric utilities that are in the business of producing electrons from power plants, they all understand that they want to address climate change because they need that business certainty for investments over the next 30 years, and they understand that Trump is not going to be in office for the next 30 years. And so they need to see market certainty, which is some sort of limits on carbon dioxide. That's what the market has already built into the system. So I don't think Trump is going to be able to derail that.
What do you think, Steve? How much influence is the president going to have, looking at his latest executive orders, as well as statements that he's made on climate change and global warming, etc.? Is the U.S. getting to the point now where it's going to abandon all efforts to fight climate change?
Well, I think he's going to have a huge influence. The Trump administration Mr. Trump has made clear that he is going to try to revive the coal industry. He's going to promote natural gas. He's going to greenlight the export of natural gas, which is going to take some of the pressure off coal. Probably more than 80% of the adverse effect of coal was caused by Obama's war on coal. That is going to end now. President Trump signaled that Saturday in one of his executive orders. He said that the Clean Power Plan is going to be rolled back. And so I think that the market for fossil fuels is going to be quite robust. We're awash in fossil fuels. It is the cheapest energy. I don't know, I understand that the price of wind and solar is coming down, but still, without mandates and subsidies, they're not really feasible sources of power on a large scale, on a utility scale. I understand that, for the last 10 years or so, utility CEOs have been pressured to look towards wind and solar, just if nothing else for greenwashing purposes. However, now that the pressure is off and they can make economic choices, I think they're going to make the choices for the cheapest energy, whatever that is, whether it's coal, oil, and no one's against solar and wind, but everything's got to be done for economic reasons. That's how energy markets work the best.
But to Tyson's point that the war against coal, as both of you put it, was not caused by the need to change environmental concerns. It was not caused by climate change, the fight against climate change. It was economic.
No, I disagree with that. Fracking was a big surprise for everybody, and this abundance of natural gas. And what it has done is has made natural gas now cost competitive with coal. It's not cheaper than coal. I mean, it had somewhat of an effect on coal, but the biggest negative effect on coal markets, and wiped out 90% of the equity in the coal industry, was Obama's war on coal.
I would completely disagree with that. The capital costs to bring a new combined cycle natural gas power plant online versus a pulverized coal power plant, there's no comparison. The capital cost to build new generation for natural gas or renewables is far cheaper than coal. And you have to remember that the biggest subsidy is the subsidy received by fossil fuels in the form of externalities. The fact that we just heard about the pollution in Beijing. The fact is that fossil fuels get a free ride because the market price for that fuel doesn't cover all of the pollution and health impacts and climate impacts that we all end up paying for.
To that last point, I would say that in China, if they think they're going to be cleaning their air by shutting down their coal plants, they're going to have dirty air forever because coal plants are not the problem in China. What's the problem in China is all the residential burning of coal and biomass and the traffic.
Let me ask Alvin about that. Alvin, is that the problem? It's residential use of coal rather than coal plants?
Well, it's the use of coal in all its forms in China. That includes in the power sector, where it is true that it's cleaner than residential burning, because residential burning is just uncontrolled, burning it in a stove so that you can have heat and cook in the winter. That's now being replaced by natural gas and electricity because the government recognizes that's a serious air pollution problem. But you also have coal burning being used in iron and steel, in the cement industry. All of that industrial burning of coal is very dirty. So all of that's contributing to the air pollution problems around China, and the government is really trying to actually now cap coal consumption in China. So for the next 5 years, they've set a target to reduce coal's share in energy consumption to 58%, to below 58% from 64% in 2015. So it's a recognized problem that they're really trying to grow renewable energy and reduce the share of coal within the economy in order to improve the air quality and in order to fight climate change and really to also grow jobs. There's 3.5 million jobs in the renewables industry in China, and that's growing. Okay,
I'll get to you guys in a moment. I just want to ask Alvin one more question, and that is, as you pointed out, China has an unwavering commitment to clean, renewable energy. But in terms of investment, what is that like right now, and what is the longer-term outlook?
Investment in renewables last year in 2016 was almost 90 billion. That's about 30 billion more than the U.S. China has been leading investment in renewables for the past several years. And as your report noted, investment in renewables is now far surpassing investment in coal power plants and other fossil fuels. For the next 5 years, the 13th five-year plan has China investing another $360 billion in renewables. So that commitment will continue, and it's a good business opportunity for companies that are trying to place themselves both within China and internationally for growth.
Right, I know both of you want to respond to what Alvin was saying, but I have to take a break right now. More of our conversation when we return. Stay with us, you're watching The Heat.